Because at some point, trying to make yourself understandable to everyone starts requiring you to water down the exact parts of yourself that your people would recognize. I feel like a better question is, can you tolerate being misunderstood by some people so you can finally be deeply known by others?
I'm Bethany, and this is Life.ing. I guide women back to themselves through grounded spiritual practices and honest conversations about what it actually takes to build a life that feels like yours. This isn't another self-help podcast. It's a space for women who are tired of knowing what needs to change, but not changing it. We talk about devotion, self-trust, and what happens when you finally stop abandoning yourself. If you're in the middle season, between who you were and who you're becoming, welcome home.
Hello, loves, and welcome to Season 4 Archive Episode number 2 here on Life.ing. I just want to start by saying it's been so special to be able to read all of your responses to my Season 4 premiere episode, The Letter to My Past Self. I truly think that's probably one of the best episodes I've ever recorded on this podcast, and I'm really proud of it. So I'm hoping that just being a little more vulnerable with my experiences and the things that I've learned over this past year of my life resonated and something stuck for you as well. And so as we step into this new episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about astrology, which feels very appropriate because last season I did an episode about the Pisces-Virgo eclipse axis, and I talked about rituals and just like different energy tools that you could use to navigate this season. I'll link it in the show notes below as well. But apparently y'all like that one because that was one of my most popular episodes that I've ever done. So I thought it was time for an update because we're moving into a completely different collective conversation now. We're entering this Leo-Aquarius eclipse cycle, and this energy is going to be unfolding over roughly the next couple of years. Okay, so before we kind of get into what that actually means for you, I want to give you a really quick astrology lesson so we're just all on the same page. So I think we should start with the nodes. So we have the North Node and the South Node. And these lunar nodes aren't planets. They're actually mathematical points that are connected to the moon's orbit. And that is actually where eclipses occur. So eclipses happen around new and full moons. So a solar eclipse happens at a new moon. A lunar eclipse happens at a full moon. And if you look into the history of Vedic astrology, the North Node is called Rahu, or the dragon's head. And I like to think about that in terms of like increase and amplification and growth and evolution. And then the South Node is Ketu, and that's the dragon's tail. And that's around decrease and release and purification and letting go. So there's always this conversation happening between the two ends of an eclipse axis. And that conversation is, what are we moving toward? Okay. And what are we being asked to release along the way? So we've been living inside of this Pisces-Virgo eclipse story since like September of 2024. And if you listened to my episode last year, you know I talked about this as the axes of perfectionism versus surrender, like control versus flow. And where are you trying to manage every freaking detail? And where are you also being asked to loosen your grip and just trust something that's bigger than yourself? So we're finishing that story. Thank the gods, because that was a very interesting one as a Virgo rising to relinquish that much control. So our final Pisces eclipse is going to be on August 27th. And then the final Virgo eclipse is going to be February 27th of next year. I kind of love that there's this overlap here because that's usually how life works, isn't it? Like we don't perfectly just finish one chapter and then all of a sudden we tie it in a bow. We've learned every lesson. All right, let's begin the next one. Like, no, sometimes the next version of your life starts introducing herself while you're still releasing the old one. But at this same time, we do have another storyline that's already started opening up alongside it. So we got our first glimpse of the Aquarius Leo story with that solar eclipse that was in Aquarius on February 17th. And then on July 26th of this year, 2026, the North Node moved into Aquarius and the South Node moved into Leo. They're going to be there until March of 2028. So this is a long storyline. This is longer than typical for eclipses to be in. And we also just had a total solar eclipse in Leo, like not even a week ago from me recording this episode. So normally when we're talking about new moons, we're talking about beginnings, a fresh start. But This eclipse is happening so close to the South Node, so I don't necessarily see it as what new thing am I calling in? I'm more interested in the storyline of what needs to leave so there's actually room for what's trying to begin. Because sometimes a beginning happens through addition, of course, but sometimes that beginning can happen through subtraction, through release, through letting go. Something goes, something gets released, and identity doesn't fit anymore, or like a way you've been expressing yourself stops feeling honest. Or maybe you realize you've been performing this version of yourself that was built around being liked or accepted or recognized or whatever it is. And then suddenly there's room for something else. So that's why I don't want you thinking about this recent eclipse as just one isolated event, because I feel like February gave us this first glimpse of this story, and then August is continuing it. So we're going to be working with this Leo-Aquarius axis for literally like the next 2 years. We're in it for a while. So my question during this time is, what is this axis actually asking of you, of us? And when I started thinking about what Leo and Aquarius represent, I realized how closely this axis connects to something that I've been thinking about so much lately. What does it mean to fully be yourself around other people? Because being yourself alone is one thing. You know who you are when you're sitting in your apartment, doing your thing, nobody's watching, nobody has an opinion, right? But who are you in your relationships? Who are you around your family? Who are you when you walk into a space full of people that you've never met? Who are you online? What happens when something that you love, that you believe in, that you want, or that you're feeling called toward doesn't make sense to the people around you? And that's where this gets interesting to me, because I think a lot of us have learned how to edit ourselves according to the space that we're in without even realizing that we're doing it. So that's what I want to talk about today. And we're going to get into the astrology, but from a different lens. Like, I'm not going to give you a freaking hour-long astrology lecture, okay? I really want to talk about what this energy actually looks like when you're living inside of it. So let's first talk about Leo, because Leo, the sign of Leo, is very heart forward, right? There's creativity there. There's self-expression. There's loyalty. There's this willingness to put something of yourself out into the world. And Leo says, this is me. This is what I love. This is what I make. This is what matters to me. This is what I have to share. And obviously every sign has its shadow, right? It's not all gumdrops or rainbows. I feel like Leo can get really caught up in recognition and validation. It can become overly focused on the self, and self-expression can turn into this whole performance, right? Like, which I think is really interesting, because sometimes what we call self-expression isn't actually us expressing ourselves at all. I think sometimes we're expressing this version of ourselves that we think is going to be received well. Like, we're still showing up, we're still visible, and you might even look confident doing it. But we're showing people the version that we know how to explain. It's the version that we think is going to get the approval, or at least it's not going to make people feel uncomfortable. Okay, then we have on the opposite end, Aquarius. Listen, I have an Aquarius moon, so I understand Aquarius energy quite intimately. Aquarius is the freaking weirdo. Aquarius is like, yeah, this is what I'm into. And like, what are you going to do about it? There's also this connection to the collective, like community, humanity, ideas, innovation, the future. So Aquarius reminds us that we're not here in isolation. We're part of something. And all of us have something that we can contribute to the people around us. But Aquarius has its shadows too. In a way, the collective can become conformity. Community becomes this groupthink bandwagon energy. You can become so aware of what everybody else is doing that you start adjusting yourself accordingly. And Aquarius can also detach. They can come off a little cold, but really they're just able to stand outside of a space and observe everybody instead of actually allowing themselves to be a part of what's happening inside of it. So when I look at these two energies together, I don't think it's as simple as Leo is the self, Aquarius is the collective, like me versus we. I think there's something way more interesting happening here. And I think it's what happens when you know who you are, when you allow yourself to express who you are. And then you bring that person into relationship with other people. Because what if your individuality isn't actually separate from what you have to contribute? The things that make you, you might actually be the part of what you're here to give. And this is where I've been thinking a lot about what it actually means to show up fully as yourself, especially as someone who's naturally a very private person. because there are parts of my life that I have no problem sharing. There are things that I've experienced that I know can help someone else feel less alone. So I'm willing to talk about them. I mean, you've listened to this podcast. Clearly, I have told you some shit about my life, but there's also parts of my life that are mine. I've really had to learn that being authentic doesn't mean giving everyone unlimited access to me. Like, I can be honest about who I am without turning every experience I've ever had into something public. And I think that's an important distinction because sometimes we confuse being seen with being completely exposed, and they're not the same thing. You see, I can have boundaries and still be authentic. I can be a private person and still allow myself to be deeply known. And I can always decide that something belongs to me without that automatically mean that I'm hiding something. And I think we've swung pretty far in this direction, especially online, where authenticity can start to feel like everybody gets just everything of you. Tell the stories, share the trauma, talk about whatever's coming up while you're still in it. Turn your experience, your life experience into content. And no, I don't agree with that. Some shit can just be yours. I don't believe everybody needs unrestricted access to you in order for you to be an authentic person. But where it gets complicated is when privacy starts to become something that you edit. When you're not keeping something for yourself because it feels sacred or private, but it's because you're afraid of what might happen if people actually see that part of you. And that's the distinction that I'm curious about, because visibility does carry risk. People love to say like, just be yourself, like it's this completely unconsequential thing. And it's not, because being seen means people get to have opinions about what they see. And being known means being misunderstood is a possibility. And the part that I've personally had to come to terms with is that the more visible you become to the people who get you, the more visible you become to the people who don't. And you don't really get one without the other. So if you want people to find you, people who aren't your people are going to find you too. And that can be uncomfortable. So for me, the work's been figuring out how to let myself be seen without abandoning my boundaries in order to be seen. Like, how do I let some people misunderstand me without immediately editing myself back into something that's more universally acceptable, right? Because I don't want fear to decide how much of me gets to exist publicly, but I also don't need to hand over every part of myself to prove that I'm being real. And there's a balance there. And I see versions of this happen with women all the time. I had a client who loved tarot and spirituality. And when I tell you this woman is gifted with tarot, girl, it is basically her second language. Like the way she interprets cards, the way she understands them, the way she uses them to guide someone, it is so freaking natural to her. It's wild. But it's really one of those things where you're like looking at somebody and you're just thinking, how do you not see this about yourself? Like, hello, like this is clearly part of who you are. But within her romantic relationships, she would hide that part of herself. This relationship she had with tarot, with spirituality, this wasn't some tiny interest where she would just like, pull a card here and there for fun. Like it was an integral part of who she was. And when you hide something that integral to you, the other person isn't actually getting enough information to know whether they're compatible with you. They're deciding whether they're compatible with the version of you that you're presenting, right? And I think we do this in relationships a lot because we want to be loved. We want to be chosen. We want it to work. And so we start making these little edits throughout our life. It's like, they probably won't understand this, or maybe I'll leave this part out, or I don't know, this is kind of weird, or like, I'll wait until they know me better, or I don't really need to talk about this. Actually, you do. And the thing is, none of these choices feel like particularly huge in the moment. But over time, you can end up calling in people who match the person that you're presenting, and they don't actually match the person that you're becoming. Like energy matches energy. Who are you calling in? And that can feel really freaking stifling because technically you're in the relationship, right? Like you have the belonging you were trying so damn hard to preserve, but you don't necessarily feel known. And there's a difference with that. And I just noticed that again and again with people. Like our gifts can be so freaking obvious to everyone except for ourselves. Like I know that friend who's just like amazing with people and just thinks it's no big deal. Or someone who can make literally anything beautiful and then she just calls it a hobby because it comes so naturally to her, right? That's how I feel about ceramics. Or maybe it's your friend who reads tarot like it's her second language, and then she hides the deck when somebody comes over. Or maybe it's the friend you know who says one thing that changes how you think about your entire life and then goes, I don't know, I was just thinking about it. Meanwhile, everyone else is standing there like, what? Sometimes the part you're trying hardest to make less visible is the exact thing people would recognize you by. And that brings me back to this like Leo-Aquarius conversation, because I truly believe that self-expression is also information. Because when I let you see what I care about, right? What I love, what I believe, what I'm creating, what I'm weird about, what I'm obsessed with, I'm giving you information about who I am. And that gives you what you need to decide whether we belong in each other's lives. And it gives my people what they need to recognize me. And I can understand why that can feel scary. Because I think a lot of the limitations that come with self-expression come back to acceptance, to judgment, to shame, the fear of not being normal, or like the fear of stepping outside whatever expectations that we've absorbed about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to show up. And especially as women, we have generations of expectations around what a woman is supposed to look like, how she's supposed to behave, what she's allowed to want, how much space she's allowed to take, how agreeable she's supposed to be, how ambitious she can be before somebody decides that she's too much, how spiritual or intuitive she can be before somebody calls her a freaking weirdo. There's these expectations about how independent she can become before somebody has an opinion about that too. And I'm all about decentering men and like questioning the patriarchal shit that we've inherited, because women have hidden parts of themselves for generations in order to remain acceptable. And I think we're in a time where we're really being asked to step more fully into our beings as powerful, intelligent, intuitive women. But even like on the other end of that, I don't think that you're going to wake up one morning deciding that you're liberated from every societal expectation that you've ever internalized. And like, that's just the end of it, because that's not how shit works. It shows up in a way more ordinary ways, I think. Like you get the idea of something and you immediately think, I'm just not good enough, right? Or I don't know, I don't have enough experience. And then there's that financial piece again, like I can't afford to change this. It would be irresponsible. You think about your partner and you're wondering, are they even going to understand, right? You imagine telling your friends and you worry they're going to think you're losing your mind. You picture your family and all you can see is them being disappointed in you. And then before you know it, that one little nudge is turned into this massive case for why you shouldn't do the thing. And that is exactly when the cyclical thoughts start. And the worst part is eventually we start losing this connection with ourselves. We're not fully showing up in our own lives anymore because we're spending so much energy preserving our acceptance with everybody else that we've stopped asking whether we're still in relationship with ourselves. And that's the messed up part, because you can protect belonging by hiding yourself, and eventually you stop belonging to yourself. And sometimes what we're protecting isn't necessarily belonging. I think it's acceptance. And acceptance can definitely be earned through editing. It's like, I'm going to show you the version of me that I know you're going to improve of, or I'll just want the things that you're comfortable with me wanting, or I'm going to make sure that I'm easy enough to keep around. And I think that you can maintain like a false semblance of that acceptance in some way, but you can be completely surrounded by people and still feel lonely AF if none of them actually know you. And best believe I don't want to just be surrounded. I want to be known. And real belonging requires enough truth for someone to know who they're actually belonging with. Because when I think about the moments in my life when I've stopped trying to edit myself or hide myself behind some other mask, when I've been my complete Harry Potter loving, altar obsessed witch, energetically attuned baddie, like holy shit, it's been unreal what's come up in my life. Like people have fallen into my lap out of nowhere. And it's not just random people, like my people. And these are people who see me for who I am. And I don't have to explain anything to them. Like one of my best friends that I've made since moving up here last year, literally from the moment that we met and looked at each other, there was just this feeling of like, oh, you're my person. And that's so beautiful because, when that happens, there's just this like, I see you sort of feeling. And that's so beautiful because I was able to just be myself with her from day one. Like I shared my favorite oracle decks. I talked about my work. I shared my story. She shared her story. And it's like we saw each other in each other. I don't know. There's just something real freaking beautiful about finding friendships and relationships and even like business collaborations with people who just get it, who just get you. And it feels so freeing. Like there's this release, like a weight comes off your shoulders because you don't have to constantly monitor yourself. It's like you don't have to explain every part of who you are before you're allowed to express that part of you. You can just be there. And if anything, I feel like the community that I've built by allowing myself to do that has made me more confident being seen. You know, we assume that we have to become completely confident in who we are first, and then we'll go find our people. But I think sometimes your people are the ones who actually help you become more confident in who you already are. Because community can reflect you back to yourself. It's like that friend that can look at the thing that you thought like made you weird or like that you were too embarrassed about. And they look at you and they're just like, what are you talking about? I love that about you. Or what about when someone like points out that thing that you've just like brushed to the side, that you've dismissed because it comes so easily to you and it's actually one of your gifts. Like you say the idea you've been afraid to say out loud, and instead of getting the reaction you've been practicing in your head for 6 months, someone looks at you and just says, keep going. I've experienced that in my business too. I feel like a lot of the clients that I work with now are mirrors of past versions of myself. Like they'll start talking about something and I can immediately feel like, I know this place. I've been there. I have stood at that threshold. I've ignored my intuition. I've overthought the answer. I've tried to make myself fit into something that just didn't fit in my life anymore. I've abandoned myself. I've made hard decisions. And I've also learned how to come back to myself. So when I speak to those experiences, I recognize her because I've been her. And because of that, since I've allowed enough of myself to be seen, she can recognize something in me too. Like she can look at me and think, okay, maybe I could trust myself like that. Or maybe I could make the move. Maybe I could have that hard conversation or build a life that actually feels like mine. Now that is contribution. That is where individual self-expression becomes collective impact. And this is also why I don't want the message of this eclipse axis to turn into screw what everybody thinks. Just be unapologetically you. Yeah, okay, sure. But real life is more complicated than a freaking Instagram quote. You know, like we are relational beings. We care about people. Other people's reactions hurt our feelings. And when change starts to show up, it can affect our relationships. You know, making a different career choice can affect your finances. Expressing something that you've kept hidden can change how someone sees you. And there can be real consequences to becoming more visible in that way. And also, being fully yourself doesn't guarantee that everybody's going to like you. And I think the reality is that not everyone's going to understand you. They're not meant to. I don't know, someone might think that you shouldn't be showing your altar, or they'll roll your eyes when you start talking about tarot, or they'll look at your successful career that you want to leave and they're going to think that you completely lost it. And that's okay. Like they don't have to understand why you want the relationship you want, like why you're making the art, why you're changing direction, or why this thing that just lights you up matters so much to you. Because at some point, trying to make yourself understandable to everyone starts requiring you to water down the exact parts of yourself that your people would recognize. I don't think the goal was ever like, how do I become myself in a way that still guarantees acceptance from everyone? That deal does not exist. I feel like a better question is, can you tolerate being misunderstood by some people so you can finally be deeply known by others? Can you let yourself be known without believing everyone is entitled to know everything about you? Because that's balance. Authenticity doesn't equate to access. Boundaries, privacy doesn't make you inauthentic. Like you get to decide what belongs to you. But, your people do need enough of the real you to recognize you. And I feel like the more recognizable that you allow yourself to become, the easier it is for your people to recognize you. And that's one of the biggest lessons of my whole freaking life. So with this Leo-Aquarius axis, this next chapter that we're stepping into, I don't necessarily see this as like, do I choose myself or do I choose the collective? I think it's more of like, who am I bringing into the collective? When I enter a space, am I immediately like looking around for instructions about who I need to be in order to fit into this space? Or did you actually bring all of yourself into that space? Because I think we all have something to contribute and to give. whether it's someone who makes you immediately feel at home around them, or whether it is coaching, or whether it's art, or the person who's really great at creating community everywhere they go without even trying. It could be your writing, your photography, your ideas, your witty banter, the way you just listen to people. It could be the way that you lead or the way that you see something that nobody else is noticing. And half the time we're looking at that part of ourselves like, what? That's nothing. Like anybody can do that. And everyone else is standing there like, no, the hell we can't. Like that's your thing. So what happens when you stop treating that thing like something you need to hide before you're allowed to fit in, before you're allowed to belong? Because being more yourself doesn't necessarily take you away from community. It might actually be what makes deeper community even possible. So I want to leave you with something to actually do with this, because I don't want you to finish this episode just thinking, okay, cool, be authentic. Like, what the hell does that actually mean? So I want you to take a moment, grab a journal and a pen if you don't have one nearby. And I want you to think about an area of your life where you have felt that nudge, right? Like that pull, like there's something that you want to do or create or express or share. Like it might involve your community or another person, or it could be something that's just entirely for you. Okay. Now, what is that knowing that keeps coming up for you? What's that message? Like what happens in your body when you imagine yourself actually following through with it? And this doesn't need to be some like wild over the top dramatic life change. Like it can literally be, I want to watercolor in the park once a week. Like that's it. There could be this creative part of you that's just been asking for somewhere to go, right? But maybe you're like tired, you're busy, watercoloring doesn't seem useful enough to make the list. Or it could even be something huge. Maybe it is, I want to start this business. I want to change careers. I want to move. I want to share my work. I want to tell somebody how I feel, or start reading tarot. I want to tell somebody how I feel, or just whatever comes up for you, I want you to write about it. And I want you to specifically ask yourself, what is the vision I see for myself that I've been too afraid to say out loud? And you don't need to immediately make the plan. Okay. No, we're not doing that. You don't need to decide whether this is like realistic enough or practical enough. Just tell the truth. What do you see? What do you want? What has been pulling at you? So now you've written all that out. Now I want you to write down all the fear that comes up with it. It can be bullet points. It could be random words. It could be colors that come up. It could be full ass sentences. I genuinely don't care what it looks like. I just want you to pay attention to what your mind does the second that you imagine yourself actually pursuing that thing. Maybe it's that people won't understand you, or you're not qualified enough, or you're afraid you're going to fail, or you might lose somebody in your life, right? Whatever it is, just put all of it down. I want you to get it out of your head where it gets to run around pretending it's the truth. And I want you to actually look at it. Then I want you to ask yourself, is any of this actually true? And I don't mean like, could this theoretically happen? Anything could theoretically happen. Like, is any of that actually true? Any of those fears? And what would really change if you followed through with this? And my last question for you, is that change actually as bad as you've been making it out to be? Because maybe change isn't the problem. Maybe that change is what's making room for something that actually belongs in your life. And I think that that's a really good place to start. So if you do get to this and you get to the end and you're like, damn, okay, like I know there's something here, but I still don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with it. That's fair. I made something exactly for this moment, and it's called Signals. So Signals is my 90-minute replay for when you're standing at a decision point and you don't know what to do next. And then you start overthinking it for so long that eventually everything gets so freaking loud and you can't tell what's your intuition and what's your knowing and what's just outside noise clouding that. So inside Signals, I'm going to walk you through practices that help you to clear some of what's getting in the way of seeing yourself clearly, so you can reconnect with what you actually know and you can figure out what your next move is. I will add the link to the replay in my show notes. And honestly, whether you do that or you just take the questions from today's episode and just sit with them on your own, first of all, I would love to hear what comes up for you in the comments, or DM me, email me, whatever it is. I would love to hear what's coming up for you truly. But I really just want you to remember one thing. You don't need to become louder just to be heard, and you don't need to share more of yourself than you want to share. During this season that we're stepping into, this storyline, this chapter of our lives is about being honest with yourself to notice where you've been disappearing in order to remain acceptable, because your people can't recognize a version of you that refuses to let them see it. And I feel like that's what part of this next collective chapter is asking of us. It's not really how can I make everybody understand me, but do I understand myself well enough to stop asking everyone else for permission to be her? I want you to bring that person into the space. Let her make the thing. Let her say what she believes. Let her find the people who recognize her and contribute whatever the heck is hers to contribute. I don't want you to feel like you need to belong everywhere. All that matters is that you're yourself enough to recognize where you actually do belong. Because the more that I've allowed myself to fully show up as who I am, with my fifth element and Harry Potter tattoos and my dorky humor and everything else that makes me me, the more I've allowed that person to show up, the more I've found people who look at me and essentially say, oh, there you are. And I think we deserve more of that. I can't wait to see what unfolds next through this next season of our lives. And please be sure to rate me 5 stars, like, follow, subscribe. If you ever want to continue conversation, I am here. And I will catch you in my next episode.